Okay, this is Chapter 3 of Zodiac. Zodiac, Friday, August 1st, 1969. In the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle at 5th and Mission Streets, I joined the two editorial writers, Temp Peck and Al Hyman, in the editorial conference at 10 o'clock with the newspaper's publisher, Charles de Young Theriot. We met each morning to discuss the news and to decide on the topics for the next day's editorial page. I would scan the papers, draw 6 cartoon roughs, and the editors would select one. After I redrew it in ink on illustration board, it would be the editorial's cartoon for the next edition. It was to this office that the first letter of the Valito killer arrived, signed only with a crossed circle symbol. In addition, the killer had enclosed a cipher message composed of arcane symbols. A long tradition exists of writers and artists attempting to solve true crimes in their works of fiction. From Poe, The Mystery of Mary Roget, and Mary Roberts Reinhardt, First Mate Bram murder case, to Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie, who was instrumental in solving an actual iconic poisoning case. Oscar Wilde and the 19th century British painter Walter Tech both claimed to know who Jack the Ripper really was. Wilde planted clues in his picture of Dorian Gray, and Sickert hid references to the killer in his portraits of knife murders. In recent years, for a brief time, Sickert was actually a Ripper suspect himself. This was in the back of my mind as I looked at the small printing on the letter. I was seized by several emotions, but primarily I felt a rage at the coldness, arrogance, and insanity of the murderer. As an editorial cartoonist, you develop a strong sense of justice, a need to change things, and as a painter and cartoonist, I worked with symbols every day. The tools of my career were being misused, appropriated by a murderer. At this time, no killer since Jack the Ripper had written the press and taunted the police with clues to his identity. The letter's strangeness ensnared me. Irrevertibly hooked, immediately obsessed, I wanted to solve what I felt was to become one of the great mysteries. The letter, in blue felt tip pen, read, "Dear Editor, this is the murderer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman, the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Valito. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know. Christmas. 1. Brand name of ammo, Super X. 2. 10 shots were fired. 3. The boy was on his back with his feet to the car. 4. The girl was on her right side, feet to the west. 4th July. 1. The girl was wearing patterned slacks. 2. The boy was also shot in the knee. 3. Brand name of ammo was Weston. Over." Here is part of a cipher. The other 2 parts of the cipher are being mailed to the editors of the Valito Times and SF Examiner. I want you to print this cipher on the front page of your paper. In this cipher is my identity. If you do not print this cipher by the afternoon of Friday 1st of August 69, I will go on a kill rampage. Friday night. I will cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend. The San Francisco Examiner and the Valito Times Herald also received the sinister letter with very slight variations. I am the killer, and 1/3 of the complete code message. The papers printed some of the text of the letters, but at police request did not reproduce the letter itself. This was done so that there would be preserved certain things that only the killer himself would know about. This is a standard police procedure in many slayings in order to provide indisputable evidence for the identification and capture of the criminal. Each third of the messages consist of 8 lines of 17 symbols each, Greek symbols, Morse code, weather symbols, alphabet characters, Navy semaphore, and astrological symbols. After making photocopies, the newspapers arranged to have the original letters and cipher delivered to Lynch. The Valito PD in turn made copies of the code and sent them to Naval Intelligence at Mare Island Naval Shipyard for deciphering. The Times Herald and Chronicle both printed their third of the cipher block in their editions. On Saturday, the Chronicle ran this headline on page 4, "Coded Clue in Murders. This code may conceal Valito killer's identity. This is the Chronicle's portion of the complete cryptogram." And they sent that See page 51 for the Times-Herald section of the cipher. The Examiner decided not to run their cipher portion until Sunday, possibly because they doubted that the letter was really from the killer. At Naval Intelligence, the ciphers remained uncrackable. The government code-breaking branches, the National Security Agency, and the Central Police Agency were asked to help. Vallejo Police Chief Jack E. Stilts wasn't totally convinced the letters had been written by the murderer and publicly requested the author to send a second letter with more facts to prove it. Stilts admitted that the letters contained details of the crimes that were not public knowledge, but said it was knowledge that could have been obtained from any witness at the death scenes. This is the one on the next page that he also had. Alright, Sunday, August 3rd, 1969. The Sunday Examiner Chronicle printed their third of the weird cipher. See page 52. Oh, okay. So, sorry, I'm totally thinking that this was in the... Okay, so this is the Chronicles portion that I showed first. This is the Times-Herald portion that I showed second. And then the Sunday Examiner Chronicle that just got mentioned is this one. I know the light's a little bad in here. Hold on. There, that's a little bit better. I can't really change the sun, so... Okay. And below the Examiner cipher section, the paper printed the killer ciphers to the Chronicle and Times-Herald. For the first time, the entire message was seen together. Donald Gene Hardin, a 41-year-old history and economics teacher at North Salinas High School, 100 miles south of San Francisco, had a boyhood interest in code solving, so he read the paper with particular interest. Since it was a lazy Sunday morning, he decided to fool around with the cryptogram and went to the shelf and got down his old volume on code breaking, Secret and Urgent by Fletcher Pratt. Hardin cleared off the dining room table, laid out sharp pencils, a ruler, and an eraser, and started trying to discover just what kind of cipher it wasn't. The word cryptography is derived from the Greek words kryptos, secret, and graphos, writing, while the word cipher is from the Hebrew word sparhar, meaning to number. A cipher either systematically rearranges the usual succession of letters of the plain text or substitutes other characters, letters, or symbols for the normal alphabet. Hardin began to work in neat capital letters, checking the letter frequency of the symbols. Hardin knew that E was the most common letter in the English language, followed in order by T, A, O, N, I, R, and S. The most commonly double letters in English are L, E, and S. The letters most frequently occurring together are TH, HE, and AN. More than half of all words end in E, and more than half of all words begin with T, A, O, S, or W. Hardin was aware that the most common three-letter combinations, trigrams, were THE, ING, CON, and ENT. Finally, he decided it was a substitution cipher where each letter of the alphabet is replaced by a symbol, letter, or figure. The killer has used so many different symbols that a one-for-one substitution of the characters was not possible. The teacher was forced to devise his own procedure to try and find things that were equal to each other, to search for repeating patterns of symbols. For hours, Hardin sat at the table working on the same haunting, recurring patterns that danced across his worksheet. If only he could reduce his number of variables. The real difficulty with deciphering this writing was that Hardin didn't know which of the three blocks of cipher came first or where the words were broken. And then this is a note below. Actually, as I finally figured out, the killer did mark the order of the ciphers as a reminder to himself or as a clue. The number of stamps on the letter to the Examiner was 2, the number of stamps on the Chronicle's letter was 3, and the Vallejo Times-Herald envelope was posted with 4 stamps. At the end of the third hour, Hardin's wife joined him in the mystery. Betty June Hardin is the kind of woman who never quits. Once she gets her teeth into something, she can't stop. She has tremendous Stick to it, Iveness, Hardin told me. Even though she had never looked at a code in her life, she plunged right in. After all, in theory, anything ever encoded can be decoded. The couple quickened their methodical pace, worked through the day and into the evening. Then they retired for the night and worried about the solution in their dreams. Monday, August 4th, 1969. Hardin was ready to give up on the cryptogram the next morning, but he couldn't convince Betty to stop. Even though at times she didn't have the slightest idea what she was doing, she kept working. Eventually, Hardin joined her. Betty was of the opinion that the killer was such an egomaniac that he would start out with I. Intuition told her that he would speak of killing, and while they still didn't know which section of the cipher came first, she suggested the slayer might start out with the phrase with a phrase such as "I like killing." The answer came like a flash to the two of them. The cryptogram contained a number of double combinations of symbols. According to the frequency table, the most common doubled letter in the English language is L. Frequency tables showed the comparative frequencies of letters, pairs of letters, groups of letters, and symbols. It's virtually impossible to write a message without repeating words, so the pair looked for four-letter patterns that would fit with the word kill. There was a possibility kill would be used more than once. Battlefield cryptanalysis, for example, scanned any captured ciphers for patterns of symbols that might stand for attack. It's a very eerie and exciting thing to see a cipher start to come apart. The killer had used kill once, the Hardins eventually discovered. He used killing twice, and killed and thrilling once each. Other double L words, such as will, were used 4 times, the word collecting once. As the message developed in front of them, the Hardins noted the clever traps the murderer had erected to frustrate them. First, he had used a symbol of a backward Q 15 times to lure the codebreakers into thinking it was the letter E, the most commonly used letter. For the true letter E, he had used 7 different symbols. The killer had employed a check-off system so that alternates were used in order although two different symbols were found to stand for A and S interchangeably. The killer's spelling was poor, probably purposely slow, and in some places he had made mistakes in the use of his own cipher. However, both the Hardins agreed that there could be no solution other than the one they eventually found. The decoding had taken them 20 hours of work. The deciphered code read, I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and the THEI have killed will become my slaves, and I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or atop my collection of slaves for afterlife. EBEORIETEMETHHPITI. Hardin dialed the Chronicle night editor long distance and reported solving the puzzle. He received a less than enthusiastic response, since his was only one of hundreds of calls the paper had gotten since the puzzle was printed. Hardin was told to mail the solution to the Chronicle, and they would put it in the hands of Sergeant Lynch. It turned out that the Slinus couple really had cracked the cipher that had mystified the CIA, FBI, and National Security Agency. Naval Intelligence requested the Hardins' worksheets from Lynch, double-check them, and pronounce the answer correct. Thursday, August 7th, 1969. The killer, in response to Chief Stilt's request, wrote again. This time, he gave more details about the 2 Valito attacks. It was a 3-page letter. For the first time, he used a name for himself, Zodiac. Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. In answer to your asking for more details about the good times I have had in Valito, I shall be very happy to supply even more material. By the way, are the police having a good time with the code? If not, tell them to cheer up. When they do crack it, they will have me. On the 4th of July. I did not open the car door. The window was rolled down already. The boy was originally sitting in the front seat when I began firing. When I fired the first shot at his head, he leaped backward at the same time, thus spoiling my aim. He ended up on the back back seat, then the floor and back, thrashing out very violently with his legs. That's how I shot him in the knee. I did not leave the scene of the killing with squealing tires and racing engine as described in the Toledo papers. I drove away slowly so as not to draw attention to my car. The man who told the police my car was brown was I'm gonna spell it because I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying that word out loud. Okay. The man who told the police my car was brown was a Negro, about 40 to 45, rather shabbily dressed. I was in this phone booth having some fun with the Toledo cop when he was walking by. When I hung the phone up, the damn thing began to ring, and that drew his attention to me and my car. None of these facts had ever been made public. Last Christmas, in that episode, the police were wondering as to how I could shoot and kill my victims in the dark. They did not openly state this, but implied this by saying it was a well-lit night and I could see silhouettes on the horizon. Bullshit, that area is surrounded by high hills and trees. What I did was tape a small pencil flashlight to the barrel of my gun. If you notice in the center of the beam of light, if you aim it at a wall or ceiling, you will see a black or dark spot in the center of the circle of light about 3 to 6 inches across. When taped to a gun barrel, the barrel will strike exactly in the center of the black dot in the light. All I had to do was spray them. No address. Zodiac had written that when the police cracked the code, they would have him. What the killer didn't know was that the Hardins had already done the deciphering, but that the murderer's identity still remained a mystery. Tuesday, August 12, 1969. Finally, the Hardin solution was published, and amateur codebreakers all over the Bay Area agreed that the remaining letters at the end of the enciphered message, EBEORIETEMETHHPITI, could be an anagram for the killer's real name. Adding a missing R, M, and P to the dubious anagram, they came up with Robert Emmett the Hippie. Over the next few days, inventive readers of the Chronicle continued to come up with variations of the anagram, and Emmett O. Wright, Robert Hemphill, Van M. Blackman, I. M. O. Rhett, Kenneth O. Wright, Leo Blackman, F. L. Boone, Timothy E. Fibberet. One subscriber suggested that the police take the notation "rush to editor" that had appeared on the envelopes of all 4 Zodiac letters and look for a Mr. Rush. One helpful citizen wrote Lynch that the letters at the end of the decoded message stood for San Benito Mental Hospital. The difficulty with that was there was no such place. Isn't San Benito? Never mind. They say it's no such place, I won't question. Lynch was unimpressed with the anagram idea. At most he felt the signature may have only been the pen name of the slayer. Robert Emmett was the name of an Irish revolutionary patriot who was executed in 1803. But to be safe, Lynch was checking out in Robert Emmett's hippie or straight. The garble might be just that, a garble, he said, to try and throw us off track. After all, it says in the cipher, "I will not give you my name." We aren't sure Robert Emmett is who we are looking for, he added. Maybe he'll send another letter and let us know. Hardin felt that the last line was used only in a functional manner to fill out the cipher block and prevent cryptographers from knowing which block was last. Unlike Dr. D.C.B. Marsh, head of the American Cryptogram Association, I did not think of the murderer as an expert in codes and ciphers. I felt that the Zodiac worked only from the example of others. Zodiac was an amateur with codes, as were the Hardins. The hunted and the hunters mirroring each other, feeling their way toward a resolution. We now know which letter of the alphabet each of the symbols stood for, but what I want to know was how the killer arrived at his choice of symbols. 55 characters comprise a very complicated cipher. Was this a totally original code, or had Zodiac used other sources to build his cipher system? If he had used particular books on code, perhaps these could be traced back to him. I began by looking for basic books on secret writing. In the preface to the Code Breakers by David Kahn, a sample cipher alphabet is presented. 8 of the 26 suggested equivalents had been used by the killer. The Zodiac must have had a copy of this book. As to the rest of the strange symbols, the almost religious triangles, circles, squares, and crosses, I remembered hearing of a cipher used during the Middle Ages. It was a picture alphabet designed to appear mystical to the uninformed, a cipher alphabet described as vastly impressive and sinister, just the qualities a man like the Zodiac Killer would strive for. I found it as easily as Kahn's sample code in a book called Codes and Ciphers by John Laffin. The name of the 13th century alphabet cipher explained for me the choice of the killer's bizarre name. It was the Zodiac alphabet. Zodiac had used many symbols for each letter of the alphabet and arrived at them through the inspiration of this early code. For example, Zodiac symbol for R is /. The Zodiac alphabet symbol for R is /with. It's this. Hold on. This. Okay. Zodiac symbol for T is like an H with an extra long middle, and the alphabet is this. Perfect. Okay. I thought that if these two books had inspired Zodiac's code, then they might be found in libraries in the Bay Area along with records of who had recently checked them out. Because of what appeared to be naval symbols in the Zodiac cipher, and because the killer had been described as Blue Rock Springs as having a military-style crew cut, I gave particular attention to Army and naval installations in the areas around San Francisco and Vallejo. I called San Francisco's Presidio and Treasure Island Naval Base, where fire had destroyed part of the library, as well as Oakland's Army Terminal. In these cases, the books had either been stolen or were missing. Alameda Naval Air Base never had the books, and Hamilton Air Force Base had no records of either book. The librarian at Vallejo's Mare Island Naval Shipyard told me the records has recently been purged. At the JFK Information Center in Vallejo, the librarian told me the book was reported lost some time ago and added that Codes and Ciphers was used for 8th grade level students as reading material because of its simple language. In the San Francisco Public Library, the book was kept in the children's room. In the letter, Zodiac stated that, "When I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all I have killed will become my slaves." Professors at Stanford University recognize this odd mixture of Christian and ancient cult beliefs as having roots in Southeast Asia and some Satan-worshipping devil cults, such as the one run in San Francisco by Anton LaVey. Could Zodiac belong to the ranks of such a cult? In his cipher, Zodiac also spoke of man as the most dangerous game. There was a movie out of release for many years called The Most Dangerous Game. I went to see it at one of those theaters that show silent films just outside San Francisco. The 1932 RKO radio picture, based on Richard Connell's famous 1924 short story, is the tale of a mad hunter, Count Zeroff, who uses fake channel lights to lure passing ships onto the reefs just off his island stronghold. The survivors of the sunken vessels become human game to be hunted in the Count's private jungle. Zeroff, as played by Leslie Banks, is a tall, suave Russian with a jagged scar on his forehead. The injury has become a symbol of his madness. "My life has been one glorious hunt," he tells his prisoners. "It would be impossible for me to tell you how many animals I have killed. One night, as I lay in my tent with this head of mine, a terrible thought crept like a snake into my brain. Hunting animals was beginning to bore me. When I lost my love for hunting, I lost my love of life, of love. Here on my island, I hunt the most dangerous game, humans. Only after the kill does man know the true ecstasy of love," says Zeroff. "It is the natural instinct, kill, then love. When you have known that, you have known ecstasy." With his pack of black mastiffs, the Count, dressed all in black, his costume's folds gathered and cinched at wrists and ankles, a foot-long knife in a sheath on his left side, a precision rifle in his right hand, races swiftly through the fog in pursuit of a young couple. After the movie, I stopped in the soft night air outside the theater, looked down the black streets wet with fog, and wondered if the inspiration for the Vallejo murders had been a children's code book and a movie. The Los Angeles Times reported the psychiatric information given to the Vallejo police by the California Medical Facility in Vacaville after the breaking of the cipher. He's probably a guy who broods about cut-off feelings, about being cut off from his fellow man. Comparing the thrill of killing to the satisfaction of sex is usually an expression of inadequacy. He probably feels his fellow man looks down on him for some reason. The belief that his victims would be his slaves in an afterlife reflects a feeling of omnipotence, indicating a paranoid delusion of grandeur, expressed through a belief common among the primitive peoples throughout history, and the taunting notes and phone calls may be a plea to be found out, exposed, perhaps cornered, in which event a grandiose paranoid quite likely might take his own life as a grand gesture to punish the world for its neglect of him in life.